Hey y'all, I'm Hope, and today I'm wrapping up all the books that I read in June. I was participating in Tarot Readathon, which was a ton of fun, and the team I was on, Team Pinnacles, managed to win the Minor Arcana trophy, so that was really cool too, and I just had a great time participating in this. And I ended up reading a total of 4 books, which was less than I had hoped, but I was also working on my thesis at the same time. I'm actually still working on it some, but I'm happy that I managed to read 4 books alongside of that, so still pretty happy with that, and I managed to read 2 new favorites, so overall June was a pretty good reading month. I will say I've forgotten a little bit about 2 of these. 2 of the books I read this month were not very memorable. The other 2 were new favorites. So that was interesting. But the first thing I ended up reading in June was JiuJitsu Kai Saiyan Volume 3, which is subtitled Young Fish and Reverse Punishment. I don't know what that means, but I did really enjoy this volume. So in this volume, we got a new character for the kind of the good guys side of the story. We ended up with Kinto Nanami. I think that's his name. And I really liked him. He's very different from the other characters who've been introduced so far. He's very, rules-oriented and kind of uptight and just kind of, buttoned up, very, responsible adult kind of a character. And I thought that he was kind of a fun contrast to a lot of the other characters, especially the other teacher that we have, Gojo, who is very kind of chaotic dad friend energy. And then you have Nanami, who is much more responsible, I think. So I really enjoyed him as a counter to some of the other characters that we had going on. And we also learned a little bit more about one of the antagonists. There's this kind of shadowy character in the background who we know is involved with the antagonists, but not really clear if he's kind of in charge or if he's just kind of lurking in the background. It's unclear exactly what his role is, but we learn more about him as well. And so I thought that that was really interesting, and I was enjoying this kind of getting to know 2 new characters, while at the same time we're getting a little bit more on what Yuji is doing, and, a little bit more of the macro plot, but this was kind of just meeting some new people and getting a little bit more information about how the world works, and I thought that was really fun. I don't remember much about the specifics of this volume of what was actually happening with the plot. I just remembered meeting these 2 characters, and I really thought both of them were interesting, so I was enjoying this, and I'm looking forward to reading volume 4. The next thing I read was one of my new favorites. This is Silver Nitrate by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, which is coming out on July 18th, actually. So you should be seeing this a few days before this book comes out, or about a little more than a week before this book comes out. But I got this one as an e-arc from NetGalley, and I loved it. I've loved everything I've read from Sylvia Moreno Garcia, but I think this is definitely up there as one of my favorites. I think I still like Mexican Gothic just a little bit more, but I really enjoyed Silver Nitrate. So this book is following Tristan and Montserrat, who are an actor and sound engineer respectively, and they've been friends for many, many years. They've been friends since they were children, and now they're both in their 30s, and they're kind of on this, or at this moment in their lives when they're down on their luck. They're both going through some struggles, and in the midst of all of this, they end up meeting this guy who was a cult classic horror director when they were younger. He had made movies a couple of decades before they were born, and then he kind of just stopped making horror, and they end up meeting him, and he tells them that he has a cursed film, and he would like their help finishing it because he thinks that if he can finish the film, it will break this curse that has been on the crew that was involved with this film. And so they kind of get involved with that, and that is such a small part of it it's a small part of the beginning of the story, because so much more happens in this book, and a lot of this is really just about Montserrat and Tristan. And so I really enjoyed all of the character work in it. It's very much more historical feeling in the first half, and then horror in the last half, horror fantasy in the last half. But it really worked for me because I felt like all of the kind of character build-up and the tension build-up helped me be really invested when we got to the horror stuff. So I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I felt like the beginning was just a tad bit too slow, and I wanted a little more of the horror to be present earlier on. But other than that, I absolutely loved this. And if you'd like to hear more thoughts on this and another book I read more recently, not in June, there was also an arc about haunted media. I will link the full review I just did for both Silver Nitrate and Mr. Magic in the cards above, so that you can check that out as well, because I have a longer Phasmo video where I was playing Phasmo and talking about these 2 books. So I will link that in the cards above so you can check that one out. The third book I read in June was actually an audiobook, which I ended up listening to while I was at work, and this was Lock Every Door by Riley Sager, which I liked. I find that Riley Sager is very hit or miss for me. I either really love his books or I really don't like them very much. And this, unfortunately, was kind of on that I don't like this very much kind of end of things. I think it's fun. I think it's very fluffy and easy to listen to. I really like the audiobooks for his books, so I've actually never read one of his books with my eyes. I always listen to them. But this one, I think, suffers a little bit from having the dumbest main character. She just makes terrible decisions, and it doesn't make any sense why she makes those decisions. But this is following a character whose name I cannot remember. I think her name is like Jules or something. And I think it's Jules, because there's this whole thing in there about how that's not a nickname, that's her actual name, and that's like an important plot point and stuff like that. Anyway, I think it's Jules, and she gets a too good to be true offer to house sit an apartment in a famous apartment building that may or may not be haunted, and she kind of ignores all the red flags and takes this job, and then creepy things start to happen once she arrives in the apartment building. And I think that I just had some issues with this because she's really stupid, she makes terrible decisions, and a lot of them just did not make sense for her to make. Especially like why she got invested in the kind of creepy stuff to begin with wasn't really solid. She kind of gets invested in it because she's looking for somebody else who's gone missing, but the kind of desperation she feels to find this person didn't quite work for me because she doesn't really know this other person very well, so it didn't fully make sense for her to be pursuing things so strongly. So I didn't really get that, and I feel like some of the creepy stuff just happens too quickly. There's not really any kind of build-up, kind of the opposite of Silver Nitrate. There's like no build-up to the spooky things happening. She arrives in the apartment building and immediately spooky things start happening. So there isn't any kind of like rising tension. You're just kind of suddenly in the midst of it, and things are happening, and the character's making terrible decisions, and I just got really frustrated reading about her. Also, the twist was really obvious to me. Not all of it. There's kind of like two twists. There's kind of like a who's behind this and then what's actually happening are the two sides of the mystery, and the who's behind this was extremely obvious to me, and so that was kind of disappointing when the reveal was just exactly what I thought it was going to be. And then the what's actually going on, there were so many like leaps of logic to get there that just it didn't make any sense, and then the actual answer was again completely illogical. It doesn't actually track with any version of reality. And I get that it's like supposed to be like a mystery thriller. It doesn't necessarily need to be realistic, but I think with what it was trying to do, the answer needed to be more feasible, and it just wasn't. So I found this one kind of frustrating. I think I did end up giving it like 3 stars because I enjoyed the actual experience of listening to it. I think that Riley Sager is really good at just creating a fun, fluffy thriller. So like I had a good time listening to it. I just didn't think it was very believable. Didn't really love this one, but I am looking forward to reading his next book because I think I am likely to like that one better. I really liked his book last year, The House Across the Lake, so I am looking forward to The Only One Left because I think I'm probably going to like that one better. I think I'm finding I like his newer stuff a little bit better, and then his older books I'm not as much a fan of, but I am like halfway through his backlist now, so I'm just going to go ahead and finish it all out. So then the last thing that I read was another thing I really loved, and this is the only physical book I have for this month. If I can get a hold of it. This was Rose House by Katie Martine, which just came out, and I read it immediately, like within a day or two of getting it, because I just really wanted to get to this one. I've been waiting for it for a long time. But this one is following the former protege of this famous architect and a police detective as they are trying to figure out what's happening, because there is this house that this architect, Dinho, created, Bassett Dinho. He created this AI house, like the house itself is an artificial intelligence, and the house notifies the local police that there is a dead body in the house. But there's only one person who should be allowed to get in the house because the house only opens its door once a year for Bassett's old protege, Dr. Giselle. And so they're trying to figure out what's going on because nobody should have been able to get into the house to begin with. And I thought this book was fascinating. This is not a typical mystery, and this, I think it really leans into some horror aspects because the house itself is very creepy and very disturbing. Both like the way it behaves and also just like the design of the whole thing is wild. So there was a lot of horror elements here, but also I think that this mystery sets up some questions. And then it does this thing that I appreciate when a mystery can do this well, but it does this thing where it goes, okay, the question is, who's in the house? How did they die? And then the book goes, but really, that's not the real question. Actually, the real question is this other thing entirely. And so it gets very philosophical in the latter half, and I just thought this was fascinating. I really enjoy the characters here. I really like Detective Maritza, and I thought that Dr. Giselle was really interesting. She's a very odd character, and the way that she thinks about things and about other people was very interesting. And a lot of this book was about like the influence that Bassett had had both on the house that he himself built and this person who was his protege. And I just thought it was fascinating. This is a book that I'm gonna have to read a few times to really like get it, because I think I came out the other side just kind of reeling from how much was going on in this book. Given how short it is, there was a lot happening here, and I felt like I just needed to like go stare at a ceiling for a little while when I finished it. So I feel like I need to come back to this one and read it a couple more times before I like really get what the book is doing. But I just thought this was brilliant, and I love the writing in here. Arcady Martine's writing is just very like poetic and descriptive, and I just really like it. So really enjoyed this one, and I am excited to hopefully reread it sometime soon when I have like the mental capacity to do that. But yeah, that is basically everything that I read in June. I read those four. I read parts of other things. I read about half of Yellowface, which I am really enjoying, and I'm hoping to finish that soon. And I also had read like half of Mr. Magic, which I finished in July, so I'll be talking about that one in my July wrap up. But did read a few other things, just didn't finish anything else. But yeah, overall June was a good reading month, and I'm excited to go into the rest of July and hopefully pick up my pace a little bit more once my current revision of my thesis is done, because I'm noticing that when I have a thesis revision like looming, I do a lot less reading, and then once I get that turned in, I do a lot more reading. So I'm hopeful to get that turned in soon so I can like pick up my pace for July. But yeah, that's basically all I have for you today, and I hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I hope you consider giving a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting every Tuesday and Saturday, so there is more content coming soon, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.